College completed their schedule yesterday with the addition of UConn. I think this is the right game for the Eagles.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. We are the only daily Boston College podcast, and I respect each and every one of you who have made Locked On BC your first daily listen. On today's show, we're going to look at who will be the number one wide receiver for BC next year. I have thoughts on the two, but we'll see who you think might be the top one. I'm going to look at potentially looking at the schedule and seeing if there's a top 25 win in there for BC this year. We'll kick things off with talk about the UConn Huskies. Today's episode is brought to you by Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get yourself started. Now, let's talk about those dogs. UConn Huskies. We now know that BC is going to play them in October next year as they take the place of the UMass Minutemen, who bailed after the MAC schedule forced the Minutemen to trim their out-of-conference schedule. And I guess BC was not high on their list. They'd rather take those huge paydays and get blasted by the SEC. So good for the Minutemen. We'll see. Hopefully their new head coach can figure that out. But UConn, this is a good game for BC to line up with because it's not going to be an easy one. It's definitely not a cakewalk. You have a UConn team that went 9-4 last year and ended their season with a Fenway Bowl win against the UNC Tar Heels the couple days after Christmas. So they're feeling good. You've played them twice in the last couple years. One of them was the horrible loss in Stores, and the other one was the one that Jeff Hafley barely beat them. This gives another chance for Bill O'Brien to wipe the crud off of some of our history, because before that game, BC had not lost to UConn when they lost in Stores. They have a chance now to show who the New England school is, which is Boston College. Now, UConn's going to be feeling good going into this game. You know, they've averaged 31 points per game last year. You know, they were playing much better on both sides of the ball. They went out and they've landed a whole bunch of transfers. Their transfer portal class, you look at the schools, and if you buy into the badge on their helmet, you're going to say, oh man, UConn probably even out transferred class BC. But they're getting a lot of bargain bin P4 players. You know, I don't want to rip on the guys, but most of them haven't played. Yeah, you grabbed a safety from Mississippi State, but he hasn't played yet. Like, who cares who they played for? So the UConn team, they're gonna play tough. But I like this. And as I said before, you had to pick somebody. And unfortunately, UConn was basically the only team left that you could pick, because UMass had that really unique situation. Like most schools, they're going from conference to conference, right? So when they change their schedules, like a school going from the Mountain West to the Pac-12, they're mostly going to have, you know, slots aligned already for 8 to 9 conference games, so they don't need to change their out of conference games. UMass had this glob of 12 out of conference games because they weren't in a conference, so they needed to shave off a whole bunch of them to make them work. That gives BC, you know, the chance to play a team like UConn. I think there's a lot of animosity between Boston College and UConn fans. If you're not into your history books, remember Boston College was the school that blocked UConn from entering the ACC. UConn was going to try to get in there, and it was Gene DiFilippo that pushed them not to do it. There's obviously a lot of resentment there. On the other side, UConn, they've been able to kind of hold their nose up at BC based on some of their other sports. Their women's basketball team is one of, if not the best programs in the country, period. Their men's basketball team under Dan Hurley has been on an absolute pair with back-to-back national championships. And then you got Power 5 Boston College, who is 1-9 in the ACC, the worst Power 4 program in the country. Bad, bad, bad. So the fans, they don't like each other. UConn fans see BC fans as elitists. BC fans could care less about UConn fans. It's a great situation here. So it brings a little bit of heat to this game. You're also, so just pretend the situation was just anything. You could bring in a school like anyone, like Western Kentucky. You're going to get 35,000 at BC, 35, 37,000, right? With UConn, this is going to be guaranteed to basically be a sellout because BC fans are going to want to be there. The UConn fans are going to be there. It's going to be packed. That is good for business. That is good for interest. It's going to be a lively crowd there for this game. So I think this is good. On the flip side, is there concern that BC could lose this game? Yeah, there's absolutely. I mean, you're playing a team that has a lot of heart, that plays really tough, and they really want this game. So you got to hope that BC plays well on this one because it's not going to be a rollover game. UConn last year, they played Duke. They only lost by 5 points. They played Syracuse and only lost by 7 points. So they played in Wake Forest. They only lost by 3 points. So they played 3 ACC teams and they lost by a total of less than right around 2 touchdowns. They're good. They're a good program, and I'm surprised Jim Mora Jr. hasn't been picked off yet. I feel like maybe another year of this and he'll be gone. So just a thought there. I think this is a good matchup. I like that this is what happened. I don't like that they have 2 away games out of this. I really wish BC had some leverage to at least make one a neutral site game and one away, but instead we have to go to Stores twice. As I've said before, though, college football, it's the situation that we're in currently is hanging on by a thread. And there could be changes, in the next couple years. You may have UConn in the ACC. Who the heck knows what happens? But things could change by the time those 2029 and 2030 games that we heard about yesterday are going to happen. Now, in segment number 2, I want to talk about top 25 wins. There's a lot of teams on this schedule. I'll tell you who I think BC's top 25 wins could come against, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 team, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting features let you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets in the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app today or go to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. Welcome back, Locked On Boston College. I'm AJ Black. Thank you all who have made us your first listen. And check out Locked On College Football. I actually got into it with Spencer McLaughlin on Twitter today when I heard him and Kenton Gibbs complaining about Miami having it hard. And I kind of went at it. It's fun. I have nothing but love for the two of them. But check out Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to see what I was talking about, go to @AJ Black 247. You can scroll through my history and find it. Now, the schedule is what it is. And there's always a chance that things are going to happen that you don't expect. For 2024, I sure as heck did not expect Syracuse to finish the year in the top 20. Just didn't see it happening, but they are there. I also didn't expect SMU to be a playoff team, but look what happened. But the point of this conversation is, can Boston College win ranked games again? Now, looking at last year, you can argue, I don't know how you want to lay it out. BC had to have had a ranked win in there somewhere. You could either say they beat a ranked FSU team because they were 10 when they beat them. True, their team was absolute dog food, but they still beat them when they were ranked number 10. Sure, if that's one argument you want to make, they had a top 10 win. If you want to say that they only you can only beat a team that was ranked later in the season after the season is over. You beat Syracuse, who was top 20 when the season ended. So you had a ranked win anywhere. You had one at least, right? So where will those wins come next year? You have 3 playoff teams on the schedule, but Notre Dame, Clemson, and SMU all coming to Boston College. Potentially, the Clemson game could be the red bandana game. You also have games against um, Louisville, who could be ranked. And then you have, other games as well that are on your schedule that, maybe something could happen that could make them ranked. Georgia Tech is a perfect team that could happen. They could be ranked by the end of the season. But I look at this the schedule, and if I was to rank the least likely for BC to beat, I'm going to have to say it's Clemson. I don't care if it's the red bandana game or not. They, in my opinion, are the best team BC is going to play next year. They have an excellent defense. Their offense is finding themselves. They've got wide receivers that are going to be out of this world with like Bryant Wesco and they got another kid. I'm totally blanking on his name. They've got good running backs. I mean, they're stacked. They're a stacked team. Kay Klubnik is going to be the best quarterback they play against. I don't know. I have a hard time justifying my brain that BC can beat Clemson. Could it happen? Sure. I'm not ruling out Bill O'Brien on anything. I'm just saying they're the least likely team that BC could beat. Next team of the playoff teams I think would be the most likely. It'd be SMU. BC held their own against the Mustangs last year. They, if Grayson James could have figured out that last drive, they could have won that game. They ended up losing by 10, but remember that last touchdown was just garbage time. It didn't, that was playoff statistics padding right there. But even with that, Kevin Jennings is an amazing quarterback, really tough team, fast wide receivers. We saw good defense. They're tough, but BC held their own against them, and they're playing them at home. Could this be the top 25 team to beat? I would say, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, I put Clemson at like a 2. I'll put SMU at like a 5. Not like it's 50-50 they win that game, but 50-50 that they're in it and could potentially pull it off. Whether they win it or not, we'll have to wait and see. Again, there's lots of factors in BC's team that we'll have to wait and see and talk about later on this winter and summer. So I put them at number 2. And I'm getting greedy here, folks. When I look at the playoff team, I think BC has the best chance of beating. And I bet you somewhere Mitchell Wolf is rolling his eyes at me. I'm going to say Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, they've lost their most of their offensive line with the hope that the guys behind them are going to be as good. And I'm not doubting them on that. Notre Dame is a factory when it comes to offensive linemen. So they're probably going to be okay there. Biggest question is going to be quarterback. Riley Leonard's gone. And that's why I put them ahead of Clemson and SMU in terms of likelihood. I'm a big fan of the quarterback position. The lines, I think, are, all 3 teams have good lines on both sides of the ball. So it comes down to the quarterback. And I'm not sure what Notre Dame has. Now, Notre Dame has spanked BC multiple times in the last 5 years. It has not been pretty. So this would be quite the jump for Boston College. But again, it's at home. So could BC beat Notre Dame? That's a big question. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois last year, but then they figured things out and made it to the national championship game. I'm going to go with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, out of those 3, that's my most likely team BC could beat. Now, in terms of other teams, at Louisville, it's going to be tough, but Louisville, the stadium itself, it's not like, to me, it does not seem like a huge home field advantage. It always seems kind of like, yeah, they're there. It's not Virginia Tech. It's nothing crazy. They could. I'm not putting that one high. So I'm going to go with those 3 teams because I don't think Pitt will be ranked. I don't think Cal will be ranked. I doubt Michigan State will be ranked. Syracuse, by the end of the season, looking at their buzzsaw of a schedule, they absolutely are not going to be ranked. And Georgia Tech probably won't be ranked. but maybe a Georgia, maybe that's it. Maybe Georgia Tech. You look at their schedule, and who do they have? They start the season off with Dion, and then they have Clemson, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Duke, Syracuse, and NC State. Maybe. I mean, they're gonna have to beat Colorado to start the season, which they're not gonna have Shador Sanders, so that's possible. Yeah, maybe Georgia Tech's the answer. Did I talk myself into a ranked Georgia Tech team? Well, I'm going to. I'm going to say Georgia Tech is going to be my choice of a top 25 team, and I think BC can beat them at home. That's where I'm going to stay with this one. So, in a moment, let's wrap things up with a discussion question. Who will be the number one wide receiver next year for Boston College? I'll explain who I think it'll be and why in just a moment. Welcome back, Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. And when you're done with this show, check out all my other shows. Go back to the archives. We're talking recruiting, we're talking football analysis. Even if it's an older show, you might have missed some fun topics. You might listen to me say something really stupid. No, I'm just kidding. I never say things that are stupid. You might hear some fun stuff. So go back in the archives on Locked On BC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Now, every team should have a go-to guy. You look at the history of football, teams have their guys. The Chiefs, they had Tyreek Hill for a while. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they got AJ Brown. In college football, Jeremiah Smith was the go-to guy for Ohio State, even though Amika Ekbar was pretty good too. My question for next year is, who will be BC's number one guy? And it's been a couple years since they've really had a number one guy. They've had a smattering for a while now of a mix of guys. For 1 year it was a mix. Yeah, I think it was 2023, a mix of Lewis Bond and Joseph Griffin and Zay Flowers. You obviously had Zay time. Last year, it really wasn't a specific guy. Now Lewis Bond led the team in receptions. He had the most on the team. But when you're looking at like near the end of the season, Reed Harris, he had 17 catches for 486 yards, averaging almost 29 yards per carry. Compare that to Bond, who had about 11 yards per carry. He had more touchdowns. He had, when he was going, he found his go-to guy. Grayson James found his go-to guy, and it wasn't Lewis Bond. Now, you're going to have to ask yourself, what is more valuable to make for a wide receiver one? Do you want your Randy Moss guy that you can throw it deep to and he can go get it? That's your Reed Harris. Or do you want your Wes Welker guy who's valuable making those hard catches and hopefully can make a couple yards extra on the yak? That's your Lewis Bond. So when you're looking at your wide receiver one, like who's your go-to guy, it may be not as simple as just picking one guy. Maybe your volume guy is going to be Lewis Bond. And maybe your home run hitter is going to be Reed Harris. Maybe that's what's going to be the situation next year. Or is there going to be something that jumps out of nowhere? I mean, if you went back last year to this time, and we were talking before spring practice even started, we would have had no clue what Reed Harris was going to be able to do. He was just this guy that was like a wide receiver tight end hybrid that played quarterback in high school. No one knew that he was going to do what he does. So to see him evolve makes me think that maybe there's other potential guys that just jump out, that take that third wide receiver spot, but get into better spots than what we saw last year. There's VJ Wilkins, the transfer from Campbell. And we can't forget about Jaden Skeet. Jaden Skeet was hurt last year. He's valuable when he's healthy. And I don't sleep on what he could bring to this offense. As the third wide receiver, he's got decent hands. He can run decent routes. I believe he's a pretty good blocker. Maybe he's it. But I go back to, I have my two. Reed Harris, we watched him moss a couple catches last year that were incredible. And he clearly has a good rapport already with Grayson James. He's a guy that James knows that he can get the ball to and he can make big plays. When you're looking at what Reed Harris did and you look at his game log, when Castellanos was there, I'm going to pull it up so you can see it. This is another reason why you should be watching on YouTube. Here's his stats. Look at the Castellanos games right here. You go up to Syracuse, he had 5 catches all season long under Castellanos. And how many were those? At least 2 of them were on dropped cornerbacks just falling. When Grayson James gets in, you see it here. You look at what Grayson James did. 4 catches, 3 catches, 3 catches, 2 catches. Clearly, Reed Harris has a better rapport with James. So that's what I'm saying here. He could continue to get more and more catches. But then when you bring up Lewis Bond, his game log, he obviously had a great rapport with Castellanos too. They were best friends. He continued that with James too. He had 9 catches against North Carolina, 5 catches against Pitt, and 7 and almost 100 yards against Nebraska. So they both have the potential to have big seasons. And I think that's a luxury Boston College is going to have next year, is that you have 2 guys that you can get the ball to in different ways and they can get you points. I love the depth behind them too, just in case there may be a surprise that we see, whether it's true freshman Nedrick Bolden or Samaj Fleming or Dawson Poe. There's a bunch of guys that are going to be names we talk about when things are moving forward. Now, depending on when this is coming out, this could be a teaser or something you already know about, but there's a commitment coming up for BC football. And this is one you're going to be excited about. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm not going to give you any other hints, but it's a good one. And I will have it completely covered on Eagle Insider. I will also talk about it when it happens on here. Now, just so if you have not been into the recruiting world, it's your first time getting into it, kids will they will commit to a program. Sometimes they want graphics made or commitment films, whatever they want. Sometimes it takes a while. So this may not come out for a while. He may take his time. It may happen tonight. I don't know. Sometimes the way that these kids work, they're all great. It's crazy stuff. Okay. Now, in terms of other games going on this weekend, BC basketball plays FSU on Saturday. Hockey plays against UMass Lowell. I'm so pumped for that game. On Friday night at Conti Forum. That's another battle against 2 really good Hockey East teams. That should be really fun. And then we'll have it all covered here. We have not received any news yet on the spring game. Folks keep emailing me about the spring game. Spring game news has not popped up yet. I'm sure that'll come out soon. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all who have subscribed. And for each of you who have become an Eagle Insider, I appreciate all of you as well. We are a daily Boston College podcast. I love talking BC sports with each and every one of you. And all the commenters, all the people that are following me, you mean the world to me. And I wanted to make sure that I ended this episode by shouting out you and telling you that I do appreciate all of you who are out there. Even if you hate me, I can handle it. So follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Give me 5 stars if you're on Apple Podcasts. It does help us. I'd love to get higher and higher up on those boards and get this little podcast going. So see you again tomorrow. Thank you all for listening to Locked On Boston College, your team every day.